Hey, how's it going, Reject Nation? Greg and John here today. We're going to talk some more about Spider-Man No Way Home. This is going to be a different kind of video. I was actually going to do it by myself initially, but John showed up, and I was like, I think we share similar thoughts on this. Why don't you hop on here with me, buddy?
I, too, am worried about Spider-Man No Way Home.
Yes, it's like we cover so much about when it comes to rumors and plot leaks, and are we looking forward to this movie? Absolutely. Are there things about that we're hearing, things that we believe are going to be in the film that we are very much excited about? Undoubtedly. And we spend so much time lately sort of reveling in the anticipation and the excitement for it. However, there's this other side where there are some things that we are able to spit out once in a while. Like, we're honest if we think like this leak sounds like bullcrap. There are things that we actually do think it seems like this is for sure happening. There's the flip side of some concern that comes with that package, whether it be the history of like earlier parts of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, whether it become the history of Sony specifically, or just storytelling, making a movie in general. And so we have like 4 things here, honest concerns, honest worries that we have. So that would be interesting to kind of talk about on camera. And just right off the bat, for you guys, what do you think are things that might have you a little bit concerned about everything we've been hearing? I genuinely want to have like kind of a conversation about this. So I'll kick it off. The first thing would be this: ruining the legacy of bringing back some characters, right? I think for sure Willem Dafoe is going to be in there. Alfred Molina has been not shy at all about confirming it. You know, we got Jamie Foxx in there, and like you got this flip side where Jamie Foxx can perhaps have a little bit of redemption as opposed to what he got with Amazing Spider-Man 2. But honest truth, Spider-Man 2 is my favorite one of any of the Spider-Man movies and just one of my all-time favorite movies. So I do have concerns that they might kind of ruin Alfred Molina. I do have concerns that they might ruin Green Goblin as well. What would put me at ease is if I found out or something, came through that Sam Raimi was involved in the handling and the treatment of these characters if you're going to bring them over here. I don't want to ruin the legacy of what they did in those Spider-Man movies. I feel like Alfred Molina's more likely because Green Goblin was a villain and died a villain, even though he was sad in the end. But even in visions that Harry Osborn was having, James Franco would see him in the villainous Green Goblin way. So even in his little cameos and returns, he returned as like Sinister Green Goblin. I just don't want it to be undercut, especially the journey of Alfred Molina specifically.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, because so much of the end of that movie comes in a character turn, and then to, whisk him away from that and to recontextualize that is a risk. The MCU has established its time travel rules as if you get plucked off the timeline, that's just the next sequential event in your world. So I can imagine ways in which maybe time and universe, multiverse tomfoolery would not get in the way. But at the same time, it does make me concerned about, if we just start plucking villains out of these movies because it would be so cool to have them return and have that legacy honored. It feels like there's a lot of potential for slippage there and to not, fully handle that right in all the excitement of just doing it in the first place. And Sam Raimi's involvement with Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness is sort of long-standing, so I would imagine that especially as many things seem to be tying into that movie, hopefully he was involved. But yeah, I mean, that is arguably the biggest worry to me, is I would hate to leave No Way Home with a worse taste in my mouth for those earlier movies too, because of it.
Because with these villains coming back, it automatically makes it kind of a sequel or a continuation of those original movies. I mean, will it make those original movies bad? No. I guess the concern is they left off a couple of these portrayals on such a high, impactful note where their deaths were so meaningful. And I don't want the deaths to feel undercut knowing they're coming back, especially if they come back in a way that is unsatisfactory. And with that in mind, I think the next thing is just too many characters.
Which, I mean, it's ironic that this is Spider-Man 3, and what sunk the original Spider-Man 3? Way too many characters.
And what sunk Amazing Spider-Man 2? Way too many characters. Yeah. That's the conflicting part. Like, do I believe Tobey Maguire and Andrew Garfield are going to be in this? I do believe it. Do I believe all these other villains from past movies are going to be in here? I absolutely believe it. Am I excited at the prospect of that? Yes.
Absolutely.
Very much so. the same time, I'm like, but that generally doesn't bode well for a movie. This movie still has to be able to stand on its own 2 feet. It's not the same thing as doing like a crossover movie of the Avengers films. The things that came before it were films that were directly meant to lead up to the Avengers crossover. So you're following a story timeline. So when you get to the time where you got like Infinity War, you got all these characters in here, you could follow it easily and be emotionally invested in it. Where here, this is really depending, like if all these people are in here, just the villains, that is supposed to work off of you having seen and remember those prior Spider-Man movies and have the nostalgia for it. This has to be able to still work on its own, whether or not you have that prior emotional investment in those other films. You know, there are people who just might not have seen those movies, you know what I mean? It's on the caliber of like an Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. or some of those other Marvel shows that were clearly being secluded from being MCU tied in.
And they wanted to clearly be tied in from their perspective, yeah.
But I think less people will go revisit those Spider-Man and Amazing Spider-Man movies. I'm talking about mass population, not just the people who watch YouTube videos and such and the ones who are invested in this conversation. There's a bigger world, there's a bigger population out there where they're like, well, I don't need to watch those movies. They don't matter.
It's the MCU ones now. Yes. It's the Tom Holland ones now. You know,
it's the same concern that I have kind of with when I'm hearing about the Flashpoint movie. Is it's really relying on me being invested in those other franchises, the ones that are not MCU, and now you're trying to bring it into the MCU. You'll have to do like reintroductions for all these villains.
Yeah,
and if you have Tobey Maguire and Andrew Garfield, they'll have to get reintroduced in some way as well. At the end of the day, the way to have an impact is you have to have the prior investment in them, and there's just so many characters. There's just so many people. You got to make this flow. It's not the same thing as Infinity War Endgame where they're already introduced. You don't need to reintroduce anyone. Here, everyone's going to require a reintroduction.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, you know, not that it will be the same scenario as Infinity War Endgame, but if you look at those movies, one of the things you can gripe about is that the abundance of characters takes away from the ability to expound on the emotional aspects of the story and really at least connect you to specific people. And those movies ride a lot off of your association based on the previous installments that have come before. I hope that they're able to bring everybody in a way that allows them to honor them as characters, because it seems really easy to lose that.
Yes.
You know, I mean, Peter gets lost in his own movies already without all these people, you know.
Exactly, and that's the next concern, is that this is not going to feel like a Spider-Man movie, and it's going to feel like a Spider-Verse movie, I imagine, but I'm still itching for the strong Tom Holland Spider-Man movie. There is a bit of a discourse, I think, amongst Spider-Man fans. I think the one who shines like the biggest light on that is the channel High Top Films. I referenced him in a previous video before. I love his video essays, and while he seems to have like this real like kind of disdain, like he gets like sad towards these latest Spider-Man installments, and I understand where he's coming from. I don't feel it to that effect. At the end of the day, though, it's like you're hearing about this movie, and the least exciting thing seems to be anything about Tom Holland. It's about all these other things surrounding it, and there seems to be this heft and gravitas that seems to be a little bit excluded from here, that even the Andrew Garfield ones were going for, at least. You know, whether or not you like them, they're at least attempting to make it this is a strong Peter Parker tale they're trying to tell, which is what the Tobey films did. And then here I'm like, well, it doesn't seem like they're trying to make that the focus at all. Ever since this Spider-Man came into the MCU, it seems like so much of his storytelling has relied on crossover and not on standalone.
Yeah.
And we're not going to get that, but I'm like, the Tom Holland part's like the part I'm least, it's like they had such a good cliffhanger with Far From Home. Oh my God, people know the identity of Spider-Man. What a crazy plot you could set up for part 3. That could be intense. And now it's like, oh, fun, Doctor Strange,
Tobey Maguire,
villains, all these other people.
Sinister Six, and everybody's here.
So I am concerned about just kind of like the long-standing future legacy of the portrayal of this specific Spider-Man.
Yeah.
That I'm wondering if years from now we might look back and go, you know, there were things that they just didn't quite do.
Yeah.
that they ought to have done. Because it's easy to get caught up in the moment of the excitement that he's in the Marvel Cinematic Universe and he's so fun.
And Tom Holland himself is just so enthusiastic and likable that he encompasses our enthusiasm for the very fact that these movies are happening. The previous two, I think, by comparison with The Amazing Spider-Man and Spider-Man, have a certain lack of, real emotional emotional loss and sacrifice for Peter to grapple with. There's Tony, but that also echoes across a lot of other places too, where you can experience that grief. And so, yeah, I feel like it's also kind of up to this movie as the third installment, and as I'm sure Tom Holland's Spider-Man will continue well beyond this, but a trilogy is a nice symmetrical thing, and I think it would be really nice if by this third one they could really make his Peter Parker and Spider-Man together a substantial and fully realized character, rather than having the movies rely so heavily on supporting characters and other crazy stakes and circumstances.
And I guess the last thing is, I'm already kind of concerned. I feel like we would be part of the contributing factor to it, as a lot of the audience there that's already suffered the WandaVision effect, which is there's been so much hope and so much anticipation. The marketing has taken care of itself just in the speculation. I'm concerned about a really loud public disappointment audience.
If it's not perfect.
Yeah. Or as grandiose in the sense of how it's being pitched right now. Here's the thing. I believe Tobey and Andrew are going to be in this movie. I do. Here's the other part of my emotions. If they end up not being in it, I can adjust. Like, I can. I just had this whole spiel about, I want this to be more of a Tom Holland. I still wanted to walk out being like, this is Tom Holland's movie. I think there's a big part of the fan base that won't get on board.
There are certain contingency of folks who, if they don't show up, there will be a riot, or at least a very vocal Twitter backlash.
Joker. He's on the taxi cab. It's Willem Dafoe.
Just everyone's cracking after that.
But those are kind of just the honest concerns about it, because I know we're getting so caught up in the hype of it all.
And it's fun to do that, but also the more hype, the more kind of nervous I get at the back of my mind.
I just wanted to do this video because in case anyone's like, you guys get excited over everything, I'll be like, well, you know what? I got one video I can direct you to where I have some actual concerns about this.
I also get worried, okay? And here's examples.
That's why we're doing this, because of that one comment I read from that person I don't remember.
Gotta prove it to him.
Yeah, prove it to that he or she or whatever you identify as.
No matter who we're talking to, we're always thinking of you.
You, whoever that is. Anyway, guys, do you have any concerns? Do you agree with anything at all? Is it not is anything we say, do you find any validity to it, other than the fact that our feelings are valid? But do you find any logical validity to it? Leave your thoughts down below. Would be very curious to hear if there's any of these things that you guys also feel you can reflect as well. We're still excited. I still can't wait for the trailer. I'm generally 99% very excited about it. And then sometimes I just get caught in my own thoughts and go, I do have some worries, though.
1% crippling dread.
Yes,
absolutely. Big stakes, man. Big stakes.
All right, guys, leave your thoughts down below. And, we'll catch you guys soon.